Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Katie Cassetta. I'm the Associate Director of the Aspen Ideas Festival. It's so great to have you all here. The speakers you're about to hear from are not corporate executives or researchers from a science fiction novel, but leaders at the helm of companies doing extraordinary work right now. This session is going to be formatted a little differently than sessions that you've seen at the festival. We'll begin with two sequential talks. The first features Sonia Kastner, CEO and co-founder of Pano AI, which is deploying AI-driven wildfire detection cameras around the world, including right here in Aspen. The next presentation is from Jackie Sebens, who leads public affairs at Helion Energy, a nuclear fusion power company. Helion has made the bold claim that they'll have a nuclear fusion power plant online by 2030, an announcement that stunned many in the climate and energy space, given its ambition and the historical challenges that fusion has faced. Then, 2025 festival guest curator Fareed Zakaria sits down with Ben Lamb, the CEO of Colossal Biosciences, who recently resurrected the long-extinct dire wolf and has its sights on other extinct species. And if you happen to catch Time 100's 2025 list of the world's most influential companies, which was released yesterday, you might have seen that both Colossal Biosciences and Pano AI were featured on that list. So thank you and enjoy.
When we talk about wildfires, we use certain phrases. It was a force of nature. It moved like lightning. There was nothing we could have done. We use these phrases because that's how it feels. When homes are reduced to ash, when smoke fills the sky, when a town evacuates in minutes, it feels like something bigger than us, an unstoppable act of God. Over time, that language starts to do something dangerous. It implies we're powerless, that our only job is to keep responding to fires the same way we always have, even as they become bigger, faster, and more destructive. The truth is, we're not up against something unstoppable or the divine. Yes, our landscapes have become drier. Our forests are overgrown. And climate change makes everything hotter, faster, and harder to predict. But those conditions are made more catastrophic because of the way we're managing fire. We are still, all right, I'm going to get this right. We are still relying on outdated equipment, slow coordination, and reactive thinking. And that's the part we can change. When we label these events acts of God, we let ourselves off the hook. We miss the opportunity to adapt, invest, and innovate. And we simply can't afford to do that any longer. The good news is, we don't have to. We now have a multitude of new approaches for every phase of the wildfire life cycle, from prevention and preparedness to response and recovery. Today, I'm going to zoom in on one part of this trend, fire tech. Not because tech is the whole story, it's not. In fact, some of the new approaches are as low tech as a herd of goats that eat flammable leaves. But tech is the world that I come from, and it's an area with very exciting progress. Before I continue, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Sonia Kastner. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Pano AI. I founded Pano with my old friend Arvind Satyam, who's here in the audience today. He and I had spent decades in the tech sector, specifically smart home and Internet of Things. Between the two of us, we had built and deployed dozens of products that integrated hardware, software, and artificial intelligence. For example, in 2014, I worked on the Nest Cam, one of the first AI-enabled smart cameras. And at Cisco, Arvind helped wire up entire smart cities like Barcelona and Copenhagen. Then in 2020, we came across an executive order from the state of California explicitly calling on the private sector to develop innovative ideas for wildfire mitigation. As we dug in more, we were shocked to learn that first responders were being sent into fast-moving blazes with limited information, no real-time data, not even a shared map. To us, this didn't feel like an insurmountable problem. It felt familiar, a real-world challenge that modern-day technology could address. We looked at the state of tools available to fire professionals and thought, we can do better than this. And that's why we founded Pano. Now, you already know that wildfires are a major problem, but it's probably worse than you think. Here are some facts that may surprise you. The recent 2025 LA wildfires destroyed over 16,000 structures and caused over $250 billion in economic losses. The vapor pressure deficit, a measure of how thirsty the air is, has increased by 70% in the Western United States. This is a strong predictor of wildfire risk, and it's increasing as a square of temperature rise. And it's not just a Western states problem. This year alone, we've seen destructive wildfires in Oklahoma, New Jersey, and Minnesota. And finally, urban conflagrations, which we had all but eliminated in the 1930s, have returned, ignited by fires in city open spaces, not remote forests. In short, the conditions are getting worse at an alarming rate, and the tools have not kept up. At Pano AI, we are working to address one very specific tools gap, delivering actionable intelligence in the critical early moments of a fire, often when it's under 10 acres. Think of it like a Nest Cam for the forest. We install ultra-high definition cameras on high vantage points. We rotate them every minute, upload the data to the cloud, while also ingesting satellite data and other useful feeds. We then run proprietary AI algorithms to detect new fire starts in minutes. Every fire is confirmed by a human analyst using the camera footage. Then we push out rich alerts to a wide array of fire professionals so they can coordinate an aggressive response and try to contain the fire while it's still small. Now, you may be thinking that detecting fires is a simple and easy AI problem, but it's not. Wildfires are relatively rare, and they never look the same twice. They break out at different times of day and in many types of weather and terrain. Fortunately, over the last 5 years, Pano's machine learning team has trained our models to handle this complexity. It starts with our rich data set. Over 1 billion images spanning 3 countries, capturing countless fire types, terrains, and conditions. And we don't just use off-the-shelf models. We have built multiple custom AI models to detect smoke during the day and heat at night from both satellites and our own cameras. Now, we've chosen to intentionally set our AI thresholds low so that we can detect even the faintest hint of smoke. This means more AI detections, but we don't alert on every single one. Instead, we leverage a human-in-the-loop review to filter out dust, clouds, and other false positives. We have found that by combining artificial intelligence and human intelligence, that yields the best combination of speed and performance. Now let me tell you about Pano's early detection solution in action. On a 90-degree day in Oregon's Yamhill County, Pano detected the first wisps of what would become the Kutch Road fire. Our system alerted first responders 14 minutes before their first 911 call. This alert included precise coordinates and high-resolution imagery, allowing fire crews to respond swiftly. The 911 call, on the other hand, was vague and did not include the location and severity of the fire. Thanks to our intel, first responders reached the fire when it was still small and contained it to just 2 acres. One fire chief told us if it had not been for Pano, we would have still been battling this fire days later. Now, I'm proud to report that Pano is delivering its solution at scale thanks to rapid adoption by companies like Xcel Energy and Southern Cross Forests, as well as government agencies like the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. Yeah! We have already deployed hundreds of camera systems across 10 states in the US, 5 states in Australia, and BC, Canada. We have detected 435 vegetation fires just last summer. We've onboarded thousands of fire professionals. We have signed over $100 million of customer contracts, and we're currently monitoring over 30 million acres of land. In short, Pano has become a mature company with a proven commercial-grade solution. But that wasn't always the case. I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for Fire Chief Rick Ballantyne of the Aspen Fire Protection District, who I'm going to be embarrassing in this section. Fire Chief Rick Ballantyne, who's here with us today. Woo! Chief Ballantyne had the forward-looking vision to install the first ever Pano camera systems in the company's history in June of 2021. In fact, one of them is right behind us up on Red Mountain. This experimental new technology fundamentally changed the way the department operates. They now have real visibility before arriving on scene, avoiding unnecessary deployments, and providing more protection for both people and resources. The initial pilot was funded by Aspen philanthropist Jerry Hosier of the Dora Hosier Center. That might sound familiar if you're at the conference today. Jerry Hosier and Chief Ballantyne took a chance on us, a new startup. They knew that someone needed to be the one to take that first risk in order for innovation to flourish. So on behalf of me, Arvin, and the entire fire tech community, thank you. Now, I am very excited to announce that Pano is just one example of the fire tech innovation explosion. There are now over 500 organizations building fire tech. That's up from just 10 when Arvin and I founded Pano in 2020. Now, these solutions range from sensors that can detect a tree falling on a power line before it starts a fire, to models that can predict where fuel reduction can have the greatest impact. There's even non-toxic retardant that can be used in new and interesting ways. So you might be wondering, if all this cool tech exists, why haven't I heard about it? Here's the truth. It's not the innovation that's lacking, it's the adoption. We can't just rely on innovative early adopters like Aspen and Xcel Energy. We need fire tech to go mainstream. That means local, state, and federal agencies must embrace technology wholeheartedly. Let me be clear. We will never stop every wildfire. There will always be wind, there will always be lightning. But in the world we're building, we don't wait until the sky turns orange to act. Fire doesn't catch us off guard. If we do this right, the next generation won't call these events acts of God. Instead, they'll inherit better tools, better systems, and a clear plan for facing fire head on. We can't prevent every spark, but we can stop pretending we didn't see it coming. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Jackie Stevens, and I'm the head of public affairs for Helion Energy. And today, I want to start with a cosmic truth. Every civilization is defined by the energy it harnesses. We started with wood, then coal, then oil. We split the atom, and that gave us nuclear power. Each leap powered more people, more innovation, more possibilities. But each also came with its own trade-offs, its own limits, its own scars. So what comes next? What happens when we stop burning the past and we start building the future? The answer, if we choose it, is fusion. Fusion is the process that powers every star in our universe. It is nature's most elegant equation. Light atoms come together, and energy is released. We have been dreaming of harnessing that power here on Earth for decades, and for very good reason. Fusion produces no carbon, no long-lived waste, and no meltdown risk. The fuels are abundant, and the energy potential is astronomical. This pursuit has not been easy. We have tried to mimic our sun for decades using things like enormous magnets and lasers. It has been very difficult, a very difficult path. But the science is solid, the engineering, formidable. So, where are we really on fusion? Not in theory, not in decades, but right now. At Helion, for the past decade, we've been quietly building. Not just simulating, not just speculating, but actually designing, constructing, and testing. Over that span of time, we have built 7 working fusion machines, each more advanced than the last. The 7th, called Polaris, is operating right now at our headquarters in Everett, Washington, just north of Seattle. That machine is designed to do one thing that has never been done before in the history of the world: demonstrate electricity production from fusion. Not just fusion reactions, not just energy gain, but real electricity flowing from fusion energy. Likely sometime this year. Yeah. So, what happened? What changed? This is, if you were in this room earlier for the last session, we actually heard the president and CEO of Constellation Energy say, fusion's great, but this is the technology that's perpetually 20 years away. We hit that 20-year mark and we re-up it. Oh, it'll be another 20 years. So why can I stand up here with such confidence and tell you that we have actually reached an inflection point? Well, to explain that, I kind of have to step back and explain what we've been doing. So for decades, the dominant approach in the fusion field has been something called a tokamak design. It's the pursuit of a sustained fusion reaction. Now, if you know anything about fusion, you've probably heard of something called ITER or ITER. It's this massive international fusion project located in France. Now, the site itself is twice the size of Disneyland. It's larger than both the campuses of MIT and Princeton. This is not a scalable energy solution. And I'm not trying to offend my friend I just met earlier who spent time working at ITER. It's a great place and there's been lots of great research done there. But what we are after is a scalable energy solution for the demand that we're seeing growing. Now, ITER really was first conceived of and kicked off as a project in the late 80s. It began construction in earnest in 2007, and we just recently found out that beginning of operations has been delayed again out to 2039. Billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars has been poured into this effort. Now, in contrast, at Helion, We are taking a fundamentally different approach that totally alters the scale of fusion. We are using something called a pulsed approach instead of the sustained approach to fusion. And this has been the game changer for us. It's allowed us to build faster, iterate faster, and the scale, incomparable. Our 50 megawatt generator is about the size of a standard shipping container. The building that it operates in, the size of a high school football field. Now, this process of pulsed the concept has actually been around as long as the tokamak design, that sustained approach to fusion. Both were really conceived of in the 50s. The problem was that while the scientists back then acknowledged that the pulsed approach, the physics behind it, were right, and that in theory it could work, they also understood that the technology required to actually build it and prove it didn't exist yet. They were going to need things like a semiconductor and advanced electronics to actually build this and do it. And they were right. Our company, Helion, was founded in 2013 because our founders believed that 21st century technology had finally caught up to the science. It was time to build and prove, and they were right. Today, we have things like advanced semiconductors and power electronics that have allowed us to finally construct these machines, build and iterate quickly, and prove this out. So how does it actually work? What am I talking about up here with this pulsed approach to fusion? So instead of trying to keep particles under extreme pressure and heat for long periods of time, which is what you see in the sustained systems like the tokamaks, we're doing fusion in short, rapid bursts, over and over again, like a heartbeat. We're using fuel. We're using deuterium, which is just an isotope of water that you can remove from water using electrolysis. And we're using helium-3, a rare but powerful fusion fuel that can actually be created, and is created, as a byproduct of a deuterium-deuterium fusion reaction. And we already have a patent on a system that is just built to do deuterium-deuterium fusion to make that helium-3. Just a generator making helium-3 all day long. We've done it successfully, and this is our plan. Now, when you really think about what I've just told you, this is the most sustainable fuel cycle in the history of the world. We are talking about unlimited electricity, and the fuel, the most abundant resource on our planet, water. That is why this is rightly considered the holy grail of energy. Now, Polaris, our 7th machine that's going to demonstrate, is not the end goal for us. We are going to begin construction this summer on the world's first fusion power plant. We already have a contract signed, a power purchase agreement with Microsoft to turn this on and deliver electrons in 2028. And we're on track to deliver. The other thing that's important to know is that this isn't guided by government mandates or government funding. We've been able to raise over $1 billion in private capital to do this work because people believe it's real, because it is real. Now, I want to turn to talk about something that is a little bit harder to talk about. First, I'll say that just producing electricity for the grid and for all different types of applications is important. We are going to be able to power things like steel mills, data centers. We're going to be able to power rural communities, desalination plants, you name it, fusion can do it. The jobs, enormous opportunity here. We are going to be able to create thousands and thousands of jobs across the fusion supply chain. High-paying jobs, from things like power electronics to advanced manufacturing. I'll tell you that at Helion, right now, I am always so inspired by the diversity of backgrounds of people that are building fusion right now. I think most people think of it as you have to have on a white lab coat, nose in the air, have 1,000,000 degrees to be building fusion. But most of the folks that are actually hands-on building this Some of the people that are leading our capacitor line right now, their last jobs were in kitchens. They were working in restaurants. They were a barista at Starbucks. They were a receptionist at a dentist office. There's a place for everybody in the fusion economy. But here's a hard truth. America is great at inventing things. We envision the future before everyone else does. But when it comes from going from invention to scaled reality, to infrastructure and jobs and exports, we have lost our edge. I'm going to jump through these. We are the nation of Edison and Bell Labs, the moon landing, the microprocessor, GPS, CRISPR. We have more Nobel Prizes than any other country. But we totally fall behind when it comes to things like megawatts, materials, and machines. We love to celebrate breakthroughs. And then we're very, very good at letting somebody else take advantage of the economic and geopolitical benefits of what we've done. We invented the solar panel. China built the factories. We invented the microchip. Where do you see all the fabs? They're not here. We know this lesson. We've seen this movie before. And if we let this happen with fusion, if we treat it like just another science project and not the literal last frontier of energy innovation, we aren't just going to lose a market. We're going to lose the biggest strategic advantage of the century. And we don't have to make that mistake. Now, I know that the moonshot metaphors are unbelievably overused. I hear them in DC every day. But they get at something real. They get at the fact that in American history, there have been times where we have invented and we have also built, scaled, and led. That is what we need for fusion right now. We don't want to wait until we demonstrate so that somebody else can pick up the ball and run with it, like we've seen over and over again. The truth is that the future of energy cannot be built like airports. Massive one-off mega projects that take years to complete. It has to be built like airplanes. It has to be efficient and scalable. We have an opportunity right now to lead in this space here, to build out the fusion economy here, but it completely depends on what we do right now. Now, I've got lots of ideas about what it looks like to do this right. So if you want to dive into the weeds a little bit with me, please come find me. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen today.
You made a fucking direwolf.
Our incredible team made 3 direwolves so far.
We turned now to that remarkable scientific breakthrough.
A howl 13,000 years in the making.
The direwolf is the first de-extinct species.
We're making history.
And it's broken the internet.
Using genetic engineering, a company called
Colossal
Biosciences
revive these extinct animals. How old, you might ask?
And something called de-extinction. Have you ever seen Game of Thrones?
Of course.
You actually have direwolves?
Everything that we make that has an application to conservation, anyone in the world can use to help save animals.
They are so adorable.
I'm like, babe, what are you thinking about? He's like, how the direwolf would be as high as his counter. That's what men think about.
This is just fascinating.
They have de-extinctified the direwolf.
Ride on them, come through with it, just slide.
I like that. Those direwolves are beautiful. So many questions.
Explain how you did that.
Ancient DNA from direwolf fossil.
The magic comes from multiplex precise editing.
This is a monumental genetic first for the world and for America.
Unreal. Quite remarkable. Mind-boggling.
One step. Wait till we see what's next.
You gotta give it up to the man, 'cause I'm back.
You go on at the end. All right, we
try to have fun with that. So
we have Ben Lamb here. I am going to try to get through the session without using the word de-extinct, which I think is one of the uglier words in the English language. We will talk about bringing back to life, reversing extinction, whatever you like, but I feel like we have enough jargon in the world. All right, we know how it's meant to be done, Ben. You're meant to find a fossil with a mosquito in it that has the DNA of an extinct species like a dinosaur, and that's how Steven Spielberg taught us this is meant to be done. Why did you choose a different scientific route? And what is the science behind this?
So I thought that Jurassic Park may come up, so I wore a preoccupied shirt because we get a lot of quotes about Jurassic Park, believe it or not. But what's interesting is that Jurassic Park didn't have it that wrong. Not that we've tried or sanctioned it, but there is no dino DNA in amber. It's very porous. It was actually in really hot places, so you can't extract dino DNA. We get asked a lot about dino DNA. It's like the first question. Everyone's like, yeah, direwolves are cool, mammoths are cool, but can we make a dinosaur? But it is very similar. And where they got it right is we have to take ancient DNA. So we use a combination of like teeth and bones and petrous bones. We've gone all the way back to about 1.5 million years, so not 65 million years. And we've actually taken DNA and we have to use computer models to reassemble it and then compare it to its closest living relative. But what's interesting, I come from software, and there isn't like the GCP of species. So we actually also have to build the reference genome for the closest living relatives, use AI to do all the comparison, and then use CRISPR and all these other tools, including DNA synthesis, to identify these genes and put them into it. And then we use a step called somatic cell nuclear transfer, which is cloning, like Dolly, and we transfer the nucleus, and then we put it into surrogate, and if everything goes well, you get 3 beautiful direwolves.
So you're going back about 1.5 million years, but as you say, some of these species, you have to go back 30 or 40. The gap between that is huge.
Right.
And you're achieving that by kind of intelligent guesswork, right?
Exactly. Exactly. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money on computational biology, right? And so one of the projects that we announced earlier this year, right before the direwolf that kind of like broke the internet, was the woolly mouse, which is objectively the cutest little mice in the world. We made 36 of them, but we actually named 2 of them Chip and Dale. And what was interesting though is it before we even try to birth a mammoth, we felt it was really important to test these in models like mice. And so we took all the core genes that drive fat and cold tolerance in mammoths. We mapped them using AI and computational biology. That's Chip. So because we don't have Dale's kind of harder to work with sometimes. But what's interesting is like we mapped them all to the mouse equivalents because there's about 200 million years between elephants and mice. And then we from an ethics perspective, we wanted to ensure that we were only using mice specific variants. And then when we did that, we saw that after the first month that they were born, they exuded all of those core phenotypes. So we try to spend a lot of time doing molecular tests, functional tests, lab tests, and even some mouse model work to ensure that we're not doing anything that takes too much risk. Because at the end of the day, we care about conservation, as you saw in the video, and so if we're taking too much risk in the editing and too much guesswork without being really thoughtful about the AI and kind of the modeling behind it, well then that could put animal welfare at risk, and that's just something that's not a risk that we are willing to take.
So the criticism people have made about what you're doing is you're calling it bringing back to life.
We've never
a direwolf, but what you're really doing is taking a gray wolf. You're genetically editing the gray wolf.
Yeah.
A few turns.
Yep.
But there's still thousands of genetic differences between that and a direwolf.
Yeah.
So why do you get to call it a direwolf other than to get on the cover of Time magazine?
So anything, and to get on stage with people like you, anytime that you do anything big and bold, you're going to get feedback, right? I think that media gets probably more negative feedback than I do right now. So you guys are just reporting interesting things and getting under fire. But what's interesting for us is that there's about 30 different ways to define a species, right? And that's something that's a human construct that we try to put onto evolution. And what's interesting about like a mammoth or a dodo, like a dodo is just a genetically modified pigeon. It just did it very inefficiently over millions of years, right? And so for us, we want to be very, very thoughtful and very, very precise. And so if we made another 1,000 edits to the direwolf, it wouldn't make it more direwolf. And so we just don't want to take unnecessary risk. And so we spend a lot of time in AI and in the computational biology to understand the genes that drive the core phenotypes. And so
so that's the key. You're saying to yourself, what are the genetic modifications that will get you to the core phenotype that resembles a direwolf?
Exactly. And we call it functional de-extinction, and we talk all about it because, for us, if we make something that has all the core genes, it drives the same ecological function, and those are the specific genes. So it's not trait engineering. We're not just like taking random traits and putting it in there. We're being very, very thoughtful in the computational biology to understand specifically, what made a direwolf. And so direwolves are about 20%, 25% bigger than gray wolves. Ours are tracking a little bit larger than that right now, which is pretty exciting. And one thing is, before us, people thought that direwolves were red because there was a paleo artist that drew she's wonderful. She drew a beautiful picture of direwolves. And at the time, they thought they were closer related to jackals. And so they said, oh, but direwolves are red. But actually, we found in the genes, with about 60,000 years of genetic divergence between our two core samples, that they were both white, which kind of tracks for a Pleistocene wolf. And so not only are we kind of looking at things from a morphological perspective, but when we can learn things specifically from the DNA and engineer it in, it's great. But even with that data, we still didn't know exactly what the coats were. And these coats on the direwolf are incredible. They have like this mane. They've got this like crazy like polar. When they came out, they're almost like little baby polar bears. They're so fluffy. And so what's interesting about that is like even though we have the morphological species concept and we have all these other human constructs and we have the DNA data, sometimes you just don't know what it's actually going to look like until you produce it. But we only took the necessary edits that we knew would drive a healthy animal. And for us, that's more important than making 10 more edits. We've made hundreds of edits in some of our other species that we haven't taken to term yet. So it's not really a function of the multiplex editing. It's more a function of just like where we think the line needs to draw. And, for us, that's animal welfare.
You talk a lot about computational biology. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, because this is revolutionizing biology, explain, if you can, to a lay audience, what is computational biology and why is it seem to be, kind of really redefining biology?
So I come from software, right? And so my background, and so everything looks like a software problem to me. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a scientist. I get to work with much smarter women and men than me every day on this. But what's interesting to me is that I feel like we're in this world using AI, access to compute, eventually quantum, which kind of like fusion, it's just around the corner. I think it's closer than a lot of people are giving it credit. I don't think it's going to continue to get reset. And I think we're going to move from this world of understanding genes and genotype to phenotypes from scientific discovery to true scientific engineering, and that's going to be a lot of simulation design. That's going to be some lab work, and then reinforcement learning back into these models. And so,
but what you're doing is you're taking, in biology, say a gene or a human genome, and you're taking the data. Mm-hmm. And essentially digitizing it. And then treating it like a software project.
Treating it just like a software project. Yeah. And kind of like software, if you can write a software app that's got 30,000 lines of code to achieve X, or you can do it with 30, you should do it with 30 every time, right? And so we try to think like software products when we're designing a lot of the work within Colossal's workstream. It doesn't really function like a biotech. It functions more like a software company. And some of those principles, I think, also have kind of these overarching narratives into things like welfare, which is great.
So the woolly mammoth is next?
So woolly mammoth, I will say that I don't know if it's the next species. We're not going to announce the next species, but we have 3 flagship species, the woolly mammoth, the Tasmanian tiger, and the dodo. We are on track, so we're in the editing phase specifically for the mammoth. That means that we have over 100 mammoth genomes, ranging from about 4,000 years to about 1.2 million years is about as old as we're currently working with.
Does it look like what the illustrations?
Yeah. So every single illustration is like just a mammoth like posing, and it's like frozen in ice. And I think people think that we just take like core samples and revive cells and just do cloning. That would be so awesome and easier if we did that. No, it's actually disgusting and gross. and we take like like these terrible samples that smell like the worst dentist procedure you've ever imagined, and then we take that and then and we have to go through the library prep and whatnot. So it's a little bit grosser from a process and perspective. But now we also created the reference genome for all the major species of elephants and open source that for the conservation community. We've done all the population genomics within those mammoth species specimens that we have, and we've done all those comparative genomics like computational biology, and we're in the editing phase. So we created stem cells around the elephants. We are now editing those stem cells, those Asian elephants, which are about 99.6% the same as a mammoth, and we have about 85 gene targets. We're not going to make 4 million edits. We're going to probably make a couple hundred edits in about 85 different regions of the genome, and up from about 60 when we started. And we've already completed 25 of those. So we're in the editing phase, and then we tested some of those phenotypes with Chip and Dale. And
explain what you mean when you say you tested.
Oh, great question. So there's kind of 3 ways to test this, other than in simulation and in kind of molecular in some molecular assays. One, you could just put it in and see what comes out, right? That doesn't seem like the best model from an ethics perspective, right? Seems like super risky. And if it comes out like pink or something, we're like, wow, that was really weird.
So you just fertilize,
you just go through the process, and then you do the surrogacy, implant it, right? Yeah. The second, which is a little bit creepier, but interesting, is that you take stem cells and you reprogram them into different tissues. So we're actually growing mammoth hair organoids where we've done those edits, and we actually are looking at the follicle design, looking at the follicle density, and those are living cells, but that's not a full animal model, right? It's like those, like that's not jumping out of the petri dish and running around. Thank God. But what we have done is we've then applied that to the mouse model, right? And so we've done the functional equivalent of the mouse-specific edits, and we tested it. And the thing that I'm most proud about is that all the mice that were born were healthy. They all had the phenotypes or physical attributes that we intended from that. And now we're doing the final test, not just of how they look, but of the cold tolerance. Like, is there fat metabolism storing fat, and are they keeping heat more insulated than other mice that are kind of wild type? So we're in those tests. I won't announce anything, but I think that it's going to be exciting to share some of those results soon.
When you are doing this kind of work, you said you do only as many edits as are necessary. What are you trying to? What's the criteria you use for what is a necessary edit and something that you're like, yeah, we could do it, but who knows?
Yeah, I think for us, it's understanding what those functional traits were that either solve an ecological function in bringing them back, or something that we have at least some directional guidance that will result in that phenotype. So we are spending a lot of time also mapping genotype to phenotype design. What
can you just say what a genotype is?
Exactly. So what edits that we can make at different parts of the genome, and some of the kind of the, and I remember I'm not a scientist, but and then
you're playing one on TV very well.
I learned. I have George Church as a co-founder and Beth Shapiro, right? So I have like really smart scientists that teach me every day, and I don't have a lot of hobbies, so I just kind of try to learn this as much as possible. But and so we're trying to map what edits will then produce the phenotype or physical attribute, which has other applications to conservation and whatnot across the board.
So let's talk about that. How does this work help preserve, existing species? Because am I right? Like 99% of all the species that have existed in the world
have gone extinct,
are now extinct.
Right.
So we're down to less than 1%.
Yeah, and there's evolution and there's survival of the fittest, but there is this human construct that we now have, right? And we are in the 6th mass extinction that we are accelerating because of our choices, right? And so fundamentally,
which are, you're talking about climate change,
climate change, overfishing the oceans, deforestation, pollution, many other factors, right, including human impact of climate change. But fundamentally, it's forecasted that we could lose up to 50% of all biodiversity, and the argument is between 25 years from now and 50 years from now. But either way, it seems like everyone generally agrees that it's going to happen. And so de-extinction technologies and technologies like biobanking aren't a replacement for conservation. We need to be conserving land. It's weird as a CEO of a de-extinction company to say that. We are not a replacement for conservation. If you take one thing away from this, please know that I continually try to tell the world this, but it doesn't always get through some of the news cycles, that we are not a replacement for conservation, but we need new tools in the fight. And so anything that we develop on the path to de-extinction, we open source those technologies for conservation. And then in addition to that, we pair every de-extinction event with a critically endangered like sister species. So for elephants, for example, with mammoths, and we actually are working, and I'm happy to say that our first vaccine for a disease called EEHV, it kills more elephants than anything else. Any poaching, human-elephant conflict, kills about 20% of elephants and baby elephants. So it's a terrible disease. We are now, we've developed an mRNA vaccine with Dr. Pauling, and we are now putting it into trials, and it is conferring resistance. And so we just open source that, right? And so the same thing with the direwolves. So while we made 3 direwolves, and Romulus and Remus and Khaleesi got all the headlines, we actually also made 4 red wolves. And one of the things why that's really important is there's...
And these are just, you're cloning existing
Exactly.
animals.
We clone
right. The way that people clone their favorite dog.
Clone their favorite dogs.
Yeah.
But a little bit difference is not to discloning in any way, but it is a moderately invasive process. You have to take ear samples, sometimes skin biopsies. Sometimes, in certain cases, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you have parts of the genome that fall off in the process. We actually invented a process where you could take a blood draw, isolate these cells called EPCs, endothelial progenitor cells, that are partially differentiated, meaning they're not like stem cells exactly, but they're not fully differentiated. And we've come up with a model that not only is great to take a blood draw and clone from that, which is amazing from an animal welfare perspective, but it's also a better cell type that we're proving is great for biobanking. And that's where we take a lot of cells or different tissue types and put them in negative 80 freezers and preserve them just in case we lose that species.
So the Indian white tiger is vanishing. Mm-hmm. What can you do to prevent that?
And so, well, if we could do, the first thing I do is I do biobanking. So we take tissue samples, or in this case, we take blood. We have tested it in cats, which is great. We'd isolate these EPCs and freeze them down. We then make sure that the culture conditions so that we can immortalize the cells so that we keep them growing for as long as we can. And we take as many samples as we can. And so all of that comparative genomics, it starts with creating a reference genome. We'd build as many reference genomes as we could so that we don't understand, so that we understand more than just the reference of one specific individual, but we understand the population diversity. And then from there, we'd start to look at how do we create induced pluripotent stem cells, so the most transformable state of the cells, so that we could eventually even make sperm and egg from those through a process called gametogenesis.
And you could you scale this? Could you?
So that's our goal.
Make 1,000 white tigers.
So that's our goal. So we're working. We're not working on that project. We are working on the Northern White Rhino project. Most people don't think of this as colossal, but we actually have more conservation projects than we actually have de-extinction projects, which is interesting, even though it's not as headline grabbing as like direwolves or mammoths. But what's interesting to us is that we're working with Dr. Thomas Hildebrandt and BioRescue on the Northern White Rhino. There's only 2 females left. They're functionally extinct. They're doing all of the embryology work, and then we're doing the same work that we're doing on the mammoth, where we're going into frozen zoos, museum samples and whatnot, and doing that population genetics work, right? So we're trying to understand genetic diversity so that we could engineer that into cells. And so this is a very labor-intensive, very expensive process, but as we get better and better at it, using AI, using robotics, I think that we can have a scalable de-extinction system that isn't going to replace conservation, but it is kind of that additional backup that I think we need, especially in these dire cases like the vaquita, like the Northern White Rhino, and like the tigers.
So how do you make money? What's the business model?
So right now we're really good at losing money, and that's kind of like the current model. But what's interesting is that a lot of these technologies have application to human healthcare, right? And so a multiplex genome engineering, industrial use cases like plastic degradation and others. These are all problems that the world has, whether it's human healthcare, it's computational analysis to understand multigenic disease states. Most disease states are multigenic in nature, being able to deliver edits into different tissues types and also be very specific, kind of like, think of it as like your traffic control, right? Like how to send edits to a specific cell type. These are innovations that we're developing, and we are probably the leader in the world in multiplex editing a lot of parts of the genome. So anytime we have an application to conservation, we open source it. Anytime we have an application to human healthcare or industrial use cases like plastic degradation or computational biology for like cancer research, we spin those technologies out and monetize them. So it's Apollo-esque in its approach, where we try to innovate, open source, but also use those technologies for human healthcare.
So tech billionaires spend a lot of their time worrying about how they can live forever.
Yes.
Can you help them?
So we don't work. So this is, I think you'll love this. We don't work in humans. So any of the technologies that we develop that have applications to humans, we spin them out because we already get enough weird conspiracies. We got InQtel and everyone else invested in us. So we got lots of weird people that think interesting things about Colossal and say them online. So we don't work in humans. But I do think that, things like pluripotent stem cells, epigenetic reset, how we can increase NAD and others in cells, mitochondrial health, mitochondrial replacement. A lot of the technologies that we're developing on de-extinction will have longevity applications. We won't take those to market, but we will spin those out and have much smarter people in human healthcare take them to market.
How did you, as a software engineer, get involved in this?
I got really sick in COVID, and I had built 5 software companies, and I was in Texas, so while everyone else was partying, I was locked down for 11 months, and I went through this introspection period. And previously, I'd met with George Church, who I'd argue is the father of synthetic biology. And George,
Harvard professor,
who
was the person who guided Jennifer Doudna on the way to
exactly. I got to sit with Walter Isaacson last night, so that was amazing. And it was really interesting to hear his vision of the future. And he's a systems model. And so my background is really in working with much smarter women and men than me to build systems models. And de-extinction is a systems model. And so working with George, he had this vision of the future. And I thought that, I was tired of building software companies. I went through this introspection, and I thought, I now have a 1-year-old kid. And so I thought, I could build a company that hopefully would create value, create impact for conservation, and inspire the next generation. And what's interesting is every time we do one of these, yes, we get some negative criticism, but we got 390 billion media impressions, over 28,000 articles when we launched the Direwolf, and over 70% of that was positive. Not, you know this from your career. I don't know what you can do in the world to get 70% positive, even if you're just giving money away, right? And so it's an interesting time that we live in. And with that, a lot of that came from kids. And so every week we get hundreds of letters and little drawings of mammoths and direwolves in education. And so now we're starting to work with governments, thinking about how to teach them about conservation, teach them and using de-extinction as a way to get kids excited about science. And so that for me is perfect. If we can create value, create impact, and inspire the next generation, then we're doing something right.
Ben, pleasure to talk to you about this.
Thank you.
I think Eric Ripert, who's probably the best, that runs the greatest restaurant in America, was here. But my thought is maybe you can collaborate with him and do a menu of formerly extinct animals that we can all,
we get a lot of
woolly mammoth roasted,
Yeah, that's weird, but I mean, I think we'd be a weird company if we brought animals back to then say now available at Denny's, right? And so I don't think that's probably the right model for us.